Today I'm going to be replacing the front shock absorber in an Infiniti G20, which is also sold as the Nissan Primera. This one is a P10, which is the 1990 to 1996 models, but the front should be the same on any of them from the first and second generation, P10 or P11. First things first, you obviously do need to take the tire off to get at the stuff in here. If you have jack stands, you should use them. I highly recommend using jack stands. If you don't, what you can do in a pinch, what I'm doing over here, which is to stick the tire under there. And if you do that, make sure not to put any part of you underneath. Never get underneath a car that's resting on a scissor jack. Now, to start off, I'm going to start loosening all the bolts. There are eventually 5 bolts you're going to have to take off to get the assembly out. If memory serves anyway. The first 3 are up on top here, and these are 14mm bolts. And I'm going to start by loosening them all up here. I'm not going to take them off just yet. I'll take them off all at the end. Some of them might require a little bit of muscle to get loose. It's been a while. You may want to try using some sort of a penetrating oil. On the lower bolts I'm going to do in a second. I absolutely had to use some to get it on the other side. I probably will again. Next, I'm going to loosen up this brake line here, which I can get at by just prying this off. It's actually probably easier to pry out from the back. And if you pry this, that'll pop right off. And then this comes out of here. Somehow, requires a little manipulating. And that should give you enough room to take everything off. You don't actually have to disconnect any of the brake lines or anything. The next one I'm going to loosen up is this bolt right here, and it runs through. There's a nut on this side, and the other end of it's right over here. This one is 17mm, and you will need to put something on the back. Have another wrench over there to hold it in place. Now when I did this one, at least on the other side, I absolutely could not break it loose. It actually broke one of my wrenches trying. So this one I've sprayed down with some penetrating oil. That worked on the last one. Hopefully it'll work on this one. I'm going to get a bit of a breaker bar and loosen that nut up. And the next one I'm going to take out is down here, and this is at the bottom of this big metal piece right here. And difficult to see in there, but I think we'll be able to get it. And this one is also a 17mm. It also is probably going to be a bit of a challenge to get out, and you have to also have a wrench on the other side, which is around over here where I'm pointing. Hopefully, let me grab this light here. And there's another one, yeah, there you can see right there. So just put one on that side, and then get it from the nut side over here. And you may actually want to end up using the box on that side, because this is where you actually have a bit of the bolt coming out the end of the nut over there. But this should be long enough to work. And then I'll just break this one loose. Now that I've gotten everything loose, I'm just going to start taking them out. I'm going to knock out the bottom bolt here first. That'll pop out. Set them aside. Make sure which one's which. I don't remember if they're different lengths, but it'd be good to make sure you remember which one's which. And then when I take this top one out, I'm going to hold it by the brake rotor here. I think it drops down if I remember. Let's see here. So if this comes out, there we go. And this falls away. Now, this right here is our shock assembly, which I can now take out by just finishing loosening up those 3 bolts on top, and this will come right out. So now I've removed 2 of the 3 nuts over here, and there's one left that's hanging on by the end, and so I'm going to loosen up this last one as I'm grabbing down below. So I'm going to hold this in place, and as soon as I finish getting this nut out up here, I guess I need a few more twists than I thought, then, okay, there we go. Then this will drop down, and I can just kind of maneuver it around. There's a little bit of maneuvering involved here. You may have to pull this forward a little bit. Careful again with that brake line. And then eventually you should be able to just maneuver the entire assembly out. Now when you get here, you'll notice there's this gasket material up here. I'll get to that in a little bit. Basically you can just make another one out of universal gasket material from an auto parts store. So if you're just replacing the entire assembly, then you're pretty much all set. Just take the new one and drop it in there. You can skip ahead a bit in the video. But if you're just replacing the shock itself like I am, then here's how to do that. In order to do this part, you will need something to compress the shocks, and I managed to borrow this. A couple of auto parts stores have them. I got this one from AutoZone, but there are a couple different ones that'll have it. And it's basically these spring compressors. It would be really nice if you have impact tools, but they're not totally required. You can do these with, I believe they're 19mm, and you can do it with just regular wrenches. It'll take a long time and suck, but it can be done. and that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do before anything else is just break this loose on top. Only a slight turn, just because it's going to be easier to do now. But you don't want to loosen up any more than you have to until you have the spring compressed, because that's actually kind of dangerous. So what I'm going to do that, it's 14 millimeters on this, and then grab something on the top, and I'm just going to use this, and I have to tighten them up a little bit so that I can grab on there. And then once I have that grabbed on top, maybe I can do this. Now I'm going to put on the spring compressors, and what I found is the best way to do it on these is to put the bolt side, where you're actually going to be getting it with a wrench, toward the bottom of the shock, because if you put it up toward the other end, what happens is as it screws in more and more, this bottom piece will lock in the whatever it's called, the thing where it attaches, where the spring rests at the bottom here, and it'll prevent you from taking the shock off. So I'm going to put it this way, and the easiest way to get one of these into place is to actually put it up near the top and spin around toward the bottom, because otherwise it's difficult to get in between all the different windings. Remember, what I just forgot is that you do have to put 2 of these things in, so make sure to put 2 of them in before you start spinning them down toward the bottom, as far as you can get them before it starts interfering with something else. This looks like I'm getting pretty close to about the best spot. Yeah, and so once they're in there, then I'm going to try and find a good spot to grab them on the top. So make sure these are on opposite ends right over there. Find your spots. Now make sure these pins are locked in place right here. Keep in mind that springs have a lot of force and they can hurt you, or probably even kill you if they blow up. So make sure that these are stuck down in place pretty well there. And then you're just going to start tightening these down. You're going to have to go back and forth, because if you tighten one too far at once, you won't be able to access the bolt on the other side. You don't really need to switch back as fast as I just did, but just kind of do it before these start to become inaccessible because the spring's curved. And you're just going to have to tighten down pretty close to all the way in order to have enough room to work on this one. So this is going to take a while. We're going to do one of those quick TV edits to cut this all out. Okay, once you have the spring compressed enough to where it's no longer resting on the top piece anymore, then you can take off the nut the rest of the way. And this one's sticking and being a little more stubborn than the other one. So you'll just have to kind of keep going at it with this and this spanner until it comes off. And once that nut's out, this entire top should just come off. Keep track of where everything is so you put it back in the right order. This will come off, and you have this washer on top. Then there's a bushing that goes right in there, which drops into this thing right here. There's a mount. And then on this side, there's this big rubber thing that the actual spring itself drops into. Below that, we have this other sort of rubber bushing that goes on there. And then this, which holds the, I keep wanting to call it a bellows, but whatever it's called, the rubber thing that goes over the shock, I'll look it up, put it in the description, attaches to this metal piece. It's obviously broken into a bunch of different pieces on this. And then there's this piece. This was actually totally missing on the other side, that goes down on top of here, between there and this. So that's all what was attached to the top. So keep that in order. And once we have that together, then the entire shock will drop out the bottom here. And as you can see, this should be pretty difficult, close to impossible, not quite impossible, but close to move by hand. And as you can see, I can move this one pretty easily. And this one's actually a lot better than the one I took off the other side, which was totally ruined. So it's time to get rid of this one and bring in our new shock and put this all together. If any of these things are really broken and corroded apart, then you may want to replace some other things along the process. There's a diagram somewhere you can find of what all the things are and what you want to order. But for this one, I think I'm just going to replace the shock itself, which should be enough for now. Okay, now I've got my new shock in place, and I'm just going to essentially reassemble it the reverse of the other. So I drop this right in there, and you can see there's a little notch for it that goes in the bottom right there. And then bringing it around to the top here, I'm going to put in this piece that goes right in there that came first, which is apparently missing on the other side of my car entirely. This one right here is what the boot attaches to. Shock boots, from my understanding, are actually kind of optional. They're used to prevent from rocks on the highway, but usually there's enough stuff covering. If you want to replace them, or if you want to use the previous one if you have them, that's not the worst idea in the world. But I'm not going to bother on this particular vehicle. Just drop that on there. Put this in place. Make sure this is the right way. You can see this is where it drops into the next piece on top. So I have that there. And now, let me grab the next piece that comes along here. I seem to have moved a few things out of place, but this will go on top here again, and there's also a little, it's keyed to line up with this right there, goes in the edge of the top of the spring right here, if I can find the spot, which I just lost track of. It's also worth noting that if this rubber thing disconnects, this is not symmetrical. There's only one way it goes in. So, for example, I couldn't turn this a third the way there, it wouldn't work. So make sure it's still in the same position if they've been separated at all. And then line this end thing up there with the end of the spring. Drop this in place. And now we're gonna line that up there, get the rest of the pieces on top. So once again, this has to go in with this part going down into there the way it came. And then we have this washer on top there. And lastly, I'm going to use the new nut that came with this new one and just start getting it in place. And once it's in there, I'm going to tighten this the rest of the way down, which will take a little while, so I won't show that. But I'm going to tighten this down, and then once it's tightened all the way down, then I can take off the spring compressor. So to get the very last tightening, you will again need to put a wrench on there. I don't know if I ever mentioned at one point, this nut here is 14 millimeters, by the way, that's going on top here. And then you can do the final tightening with that, with another one of your adjustable wrenches in place. And then once that's done, it's time to begin the slow and painstaking process of taking these things back off. One thing I should have mentioned earlier, you may, toward the bottom, need to begin using a spanner because there won't be enough clearance to actually get a socket in there anymore. So that's definitely my least favorite part of the process, but it's most of this grunt work. And now that I've got these all loosened up again, I'm going to pop these out, these little things here, and I should get far enough to swing the top parts out. There's that one. Do the same for the other side. And then, let's see. I need to find a good spot to get these out, actually. It's a little bit too close to the edge there. There we go. And now we can just move the bottom ones, rotate the bottom ones around until we have enough room for them to clear their way out. Which usually takes a couple of turns. Almost there. That should be enough room, I think. Maybe. And then, no, move it up further. There we go. There's one. And here's the other. And now this assembly is just about ready to put back in the car. Now, I talked earlier about the gasket that's missing here. And what this does is it reduces the amount of noise that transfers to the car from there. So, since this is obviously totally broken and probably will be on your car too, I was able to find at Advanced Auto Parts, I don't remember the part number, but I'll put it in the description. I was able to get just a big sheet of gasket material that's about a similar thickness as this. And then I cut out, or to be more honest, I got a friend to cut out because I'm not very good at this sort of detail work, a piece that matches it. Now remember that these are somewhat offset, so it has to be put on the right way because these are not equally spaced apart. And eventually I will figure this out. That looks about right. And now that I have that on, it's ready to be put back inside the car. Now, while not totally necessary, an assistant is very helpful for this part. You want to line this up to go the correct way. You'll notice that these two on the back, toward the back of the car, are spaced a little closer together, and this one's the one that's further apart. So line that up with how this goes in here, and then feed it up through, and if you can, you get an assistant to come and just loosely start threading these. And there. Looks like I am going to be able to do this on my own. Get that up there, start threading these into place. Okay, and now we're going to put in the bolts. This has to go into the bottom here. Remember which is which. The longer bolt, in case you forgot, is the one that goes up on top here. The shorter one goes down in the bottom, and that's going to go through this side, from the front toward the back, and through the thing right here. Now, one thing to be careful of, and I didn't even think of it because this didn't happen on the other side, but it's possible if you let this thing out too far for the inner tripod of the CV axle to pop out of its socket, and then the whole thing won't go together, and you'll have to spend a bunch of time getting your CV inner tripod back into place, which I just did a moment ago, which was kind of annoying. So watch out for that. It doesn't help that this boot is torn and I need to replace it, so that's maybe the next video I'm going to do. But I'll put it back together just for now. And you can feed this through this side when you have it lined up, and then if you maneuver it a little bit, it'll go through to the other side. Once you have that one in place, you can go ahead and take this other longer bolt, drop this one down from here, maneuver this into place, and then drive it through same from the front of the car toward the back, and that's going to go on the back side. So get that up in there. Hopefully you can get a good view on the camera here. And hold it in place with one hand and drive this through front to back. That's not quite right. Here we go. Front to back. And then as you get it through the back here, then you're just going to put the nut, might need to do a little bit of screwing to get it through, and then you're going to put the nuts on the back over here and tighten those in. Tighten the nuts on here. And the bottom over here, of course. And remember to tighten, while you're tightening these down, to grab the bolt from the back with another wrench or another socket. And then remember to put your brake line clip back into place. Over here, you can pull it in through the back, and then take your clip, which goes with the circular, or the convex sides out towards you over here. Hold that in place, and just kind of tap it in. Okay. Then I'm going to tighten these bolts up top here. Then put the wheel back on. And then you're ready to take it out for a drive. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you're going to do this, be safe. Read the description down there. Always never get under a car. Like, never put any part of you under a car if you don't have a jack stand. And be careful with the springs, because they have a huge amount of force. So make sure that you have all the that your spring compressors are stable and in place correctly. Yeah.